Welcome, system thinkers. You're watching The Question. I'm your host, Ben Callahan, and each week I invite a new co-host to join us and help facilitate a deep dive into design systems. This episode of The Question is sponsored by Zeroheight and Sparkbox, and we're so glad you're here. Hello, everyone. Thanks for taking some time out of your day to join me for this episode's deep dive. My name is Ben Callahan. I'm a design system researcher, writer, speaker, coach, and consultant. But most of all, I'm a curious guy. And that's precisely what led me to create The Question. Every week, a new co-host and I will ask you a few questions about a very specific design system-related topic. You'll have 48 hours to answer, and everyone who does is invited to join the deep dive. Each week is like a mini research project on a very niche design system topic. And this only works if we all stay in learning mode. Before I introduce my co-host for this week, I just want to say a big thank you to Zeroheight and Sparkbox for sponsoring this episode. Zeroheight is the end-to-end design system management platform, the place your team can document, deliver, measure, and evolve your design system. Book a demo or learn more at zeroheight.com. Sparkbox partners with complex organizations to create user-driven digital experiences, including world-class design systems. Learn more at sparkbox.com/thequestion. This week, I'm joined by my co-host, Michell Walton, to discuss the difference between product design and system design. Michelle, tell us a little about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. I am Michell Walton. I lead design excellence and operations at Lululemon. A huge part of my scope is design systems, digital accessibility, workflow optimization. So it all kind of goes in together. Prior to this, I was at Rocket. I did a multi-brand design system for the Rocket family of companies. And then before that, I was in the branding and digital space. So similar to Ben, it's like I've been in systems thinking my whole life. I was like doing it before it was cool. So definitely a systems thinker, strong background in visual design, passion for collaboration, and design systems is just, it's that sweet spot. It brings it all together. And yeah, so I love it. It's been great. Yeah. Nice to meet you all.
So the structure of the day, you can see I've got a little bit of information here about the question. So this is restating what we originally asked. Michelle and I have been going through the results and digging in, and we're going to provide just a high-level summary of all the things that you all shared with us. We had some shared observations, and so we built a little section at the bottom of this to talk through, so we'll do that. And then if we have time remaining, we've got 3 sort of deeper dive questions that we can dive into that are all related to what we've learned from these results. Well, let's do it. So just a recap of the question. So the question itself was, what's your perspective on the difference, the distinction between the role of a product designer and the role of a system designer? And this came up to me because I would do some coaching, and I was in a conversation with somebody who leads a design system team, and we were talking about the structure of their team. And when I mentioned this idea of a systems designer, that just wasn't even something they had heard of. And so it got me thinking, oh my goodness, is this not a common role? And so I started asking around, and I realized that some organizations are very aware of this, some are not. And so I thought this would be a really good starting point. And when I pitched a few of the ideas to Michelle, this is the one she honed in on right away. So that's why we're here. We sent the question to 111 people. Almost all of those folks are deep specialization in design systems in some capacity. So it's a lot of practitioners. And then we received 48 responses. So almost half, which felt really good to me, So I kind of broke this responses up into, and these are just all quotes directly from answers that folks shared. So there were a handful of folks who were of a strong belief that there's no distinction between these roles. There shouldn't be a distinction. There were a handful of folks who were very adamant that there definitely should be a distinction. So the no distinction comments are ones that hint at that or above. The ones that imply there should be a distinction are below. And then almost all the answers had listed, different characteristics about these roles. And so I tried to kind of capture those as well. So product designers in general a lot of folks said they're more aligned with the product owners. They're focused on a single product's needs. They're focused more on feature delivery, user journeys, quick iteration, experimentation, this kind of stuff. And the sort of summary characteristics I identified were down here, just that they're more into they're prioritizing speed and exploration, a little bit more visionary. Michelle, is that sort of your understanding of the role too? Yeah. Good. And systems designers over here, we saw different characteristics, right? They sweat the details of theming, accessibility, responsiveness across devices. There's this whole idea, and a lot of folks mentioned this idea of tokens, as something that's kind of the domain of the systems designers. Going deep on knowledge of variance and accessibility, that was common. They benefit from previous experience as a product designer. So this is something that I'm not sure if everybody agrees with this, and something Michelle called out to me later. So we'll talk about that in the next section. But large focus on UX and UI quality. They should aid and guide the innovation by identifying the redundancies that appear in the process of creation and automate functions as much as possible, freeing up more time to think and create a safe space for the product designer's exploration. So the characteristics that I sort of pulled out here were they embrace compromise, they lead collaboration efforts, they have an understanding of engineering. That was another theme, is that the systems designer has to have a deeper understanding of what's happening with the engineering side of things. They focus on quality over speed. They own the idea of automating things, and they're thinking a lot about stability. So the distinctions. Michelle? What I feel like I'm just yelling at people. Tell me what you're thinking here.
Actually, I like how you kind of went through each. It's so interesting. As I've been in this work, I keep feeling this like strong juxtaposition where it's like they're almost like polar opposites. And I know there's some other things captured here, but it's like with systems, I'm like, you're all about consistency, and I'm going to screw this word up. I like can't say some words, but with like product designers, it's all about like specificity.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. So you're like really like thinking about how can I like very much design for the specific user. And then I think too, like the other thing is there's like constraints, and like systems designers are like, what already exists? Like what's in the existing walls that we can systematize for more efficiency and higher quality? And then with product designers, I'm like, it's like the exact opposite. They're like, how can we break the walls down? How can we innovate? How can we experiment? So I feel like it's so interesting because both roles are working towards the shared goal of like great user experiences and business growth and like helping people and adding value. But like they take a completely different approach. So it's, yeah. And I think a lot of that, you've started to kind of capture it here when you're like quality over speed, right? Like product, they're like, ship it, move. And we're like, hey, make sure it's accessible, make sure it performs, make sure the pixels are perfect, make sure it's on brand. Like we're like going through this very rigorous process. So yeah, I think what you guys have all captured here, and Ben, your notes are great. But yeah, just wanted to call out, I think it's interesting, right? It's like two ends of the field, and then they overlap to create really amazing products.
Yeah. And Jesse, your observations to the right over here, I'd love to have you chime in on this. So ask these questions so folks can kind of hear, or like what's driving those ideas.
Many of the organizations that I've been a part of, systems designer, a lot of the systems at big organizations are really, like some big headless CMS that's driving all the business units. So when I think about systems, it's often just being driven by DevOps teams, and you have teams that are building out it's really engineering. So I'm curious if what we're talking about here is design ops, which I think in my mind is really sort of like setting up token transformation processes, figuring out the pipeline from design to engineering versus, just the more like larger systems level initiative that an organization might tackle. I think that's kind of why I raised some of those things.
Yeah, the word systems kind of gets tangled up in all of this, right? Because systems. I've been watching all these Russell Ackoff videos. I don't know if you all know this. He's like an old college professor from a while ago, but he has all these incredible presentations and writings on systems thinking. It's very high level stuff. He's talking about, universal systems all the way down to like tiny systems that exist in our everyday life. And there's a lot of interesting analogy here, but it can cover everything. Everything is a system, essentially, is kind of and if you think you're at the top, you're not, because you can always go out another layer to another system, right? So maybe that's a little bit of the question here, is like, where does this start and stop? Anybody have thoughts on this?
I have thoughts. I think that the word design is key, and that a lot of times, or at least where companies are at today, a lot of times engineers are not necessarily associating themselves with design, but I almost see like design is like anything front end, whether you're in Figma, whether you're in React, whether you're coding or like whatever it is. I think of like design engineering. I think so. It's like, to me, it's like really the visual, well, and behavioral aspect of it, but it's like, it's not that back end architecture. To me, it's like we have a design library, we have a code library, we have clear documentation and standards on how to use the things. We're not just creating like a widget in the CMS. We're actually thinking about how that widget is structured, like the atoms that build it and make it up, how those can be reused to make other modulars. So to me, it's a very like broad area. But yeah, I think I see it for both design and engineering. And like I said, documentation as well. And it's interesting too, that like, this is still a question in the community because we expect our teams, our design teams and engineering teams and product teams to understand design systems. And I think like we as a community can't even fully be aligned, right? On like a single definition of what it is. So
Ron,
that's a great question.
Ron, is that your comment in purple there about the systems designers at your org are also involved in the exploratory stuff?
Just noting the bullet points that you gave earlier on. I just wanted to kind of, well, not push back on, but in our organization, because we're the only designers that have visibility across all of the digital touch points and sort of higher up the food chain than the other designers, we're the ones that are involved with the brand team in actually formulating what the brand should look like in a specifically digital context. And so our designers have been doing that visionary, exploratory stuff.
So those are the systems designers.
Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. So Jesse, I think most folks, from my reading through the notes, most folks I think answered this from the perspective, not that systems designers are engineers, but that they are still visual designers, but that they are focused on the system, the design system as their sort of product. Anybody have thoughts to that, or Jesse, does that resonate?
It does. What I often think about is the spectrum of, from design all the way to the implementation in software. And so just as an example, if you say, okay, we've got a Figma component UI kit that represents the components that exist in our software, and maybe there's some connection through with like design tokens, for example. I've worked on front-end engineering teams, and there's always that conversation about, okay, if we build these widgets, let's say for an application, some editor at some point is going to need to specify content to go in there. So you can't completely cut it off, and there needs to be that communication all the way through. And I think that's why I ask, because I tend to see that thread that connects from design all the way to the actual software implementation. So,
I mean, I really liked Ron's point. I put a note in here that, like, I totally agree. I think design system teams can be, the visibility that they have into all products at all times across all platforms is invaluable of working with the brand team. Because, I mean, essentially brands, because back to your point, everything's a system. Everything fits into a system. The old time brand style guides, print style guides, those were the original systems. And like to intersect those, the Venn diagram of the brand system and the design digital system is kind of the design system right in the middle. And you can affect major global change from the design system team and push it out to all of the products.
Yeah, these are great points. It's funny because there were some folks who responded who were very sort of adamant that there shouldn't be a distinction. I don't see a productive distinction between them in terms of titles, but maybe a little bit as roles or on the spectrum that designers can move between. So we'll talk a little bit about that maturity of the product designer role here in a moment. There was one that was very, let's see. I don't believe there should be yet another new job title created by the design community to blur the line between roles and outcomes. So another strong opinion there that this just shouldn't be something we're thinking about. And then these comments were, this comment I loved. I've seen strong designers crumple under the pressure under the delivery pressure of a product role. And I've seen strong designers lose their minds working in the minutia required in a system design role. So this is getting at the distinction, right? So it's not that there isn't a little minutia to deal with if you're a product designer, and it's not that there isn't pressure if you're a systems designer, but those maybe tend to be more a part of these roles, right? That the systems designer is in there thinking about every possible variant, every way that component or pattern could be evolved or changed. And the product designer is focused on their problem set, right? They're very singular focused. So that's a distinction, maybe more in the characteristics of the individual that would do well in those roles. Thoughts on any of that?
And I have a thought. In my last role, we were building a design system from scratch that the end user would be our marketing team to be able to upload content to our website directly. And I kind of teach my teams, like, everyone is the user, including our internal company users. So as a product designer, they should be thinking of our customer base user, but also our internal teams as users as well. So I do kind of think that role gets blurred for me there, because as a systems designer, you are designing for an internal user. So it's not just about, accessibility or making sure that everything's labeled correctly or using design tokens, but that everyone can understand their system.
That's a great observation. Michelle, what's going on in your mind right now?
Yeah, no, I think I definitely agree. I think that, and even when I went through it, it's like we're always talking about the tactical role of design systems, like, or the tangible, right? Like, here's your component library, here's your documentation hub. This is where you go for this. But it's like, if you are thinking for the user and you are designing for the user, you're not, and when I say user, I mean internal teams. When I say end user, I mean the people that are on the site, our consumers. But it's like, when we're designing for the user, we're thinking through like awareness. We're thinking through, we even think through like go-to-market strategy, right? When we launch a new design systems, we're thinking through like support, we're thinking through education, we're thinking through training. Like, I think there is so much more to it than just being like, just extracting a design component and saying, oh, that was in the experience. Like, you're also educating teams on how to use it and ensuring that they understand it, so that as things continue to be built in the future, they can like back into that system. And I feel like a lot of times I've gotten questions before where they're like, why is there so much work on the design system? And like, all you're doing is making a component, or all you're doing is this. And it's like, if you actually think through the journey of what you're doing, it's like, well, like, I'm creating the component. So I think there's one thing of like designing the component, but then I'm creating the component for my users, my internal teams, which means I'm thinking through the component architecture of how everything is connected. I'm making sure that it has a very clear and intuitive name that would be easily recognized. I'm making sure that when I put it in Figma or I put it in the code library, that it has like the proper metadata and that it's easy to find and they can use the search function. I'm thinking about how they all interconnect. And then I'm not just shipping that, I'm going to document and standardize it so that if a content designer goes to write content and this was designed for 50 character count, like, they understand that. So it's like, there's a lot of guidance and a lot of standardization that is happening in this like coaching, training, and thinking for the users. And we will think of like how they're using the design system. How are they onboarded? What's their first day like? Like, that's going to make a huge difference. If you join a team and the design system team reaches out and says, hey, this is available, we want to help you, we want to talk to you. So yeah, I love that you brought that up. We're not just designing for the end users.
I'm thinking about the analogy, Michelle, you're sharing, and Christy, your comments, and thinking like, and the idea that right there, these are all just systems. They're all a product, even just in and of itself, is definitely a very complex system, right? And so in that model, product designers are system designers too. Their system is just a little smaller. And I'm thinking about all the things we were just talking about. So it's not just the components, it's not just the design and development, it's also the education, the engagement, all those other pieces. when I think about that on the product side, a product designer is not responsible for selling their product. They're not responsible for educating users how to use the product. They're not responsible for answering the questions that their users send in or to customer support. Instead, we have like entire divisions dedicated. There's a sales team, there's a customer support team, there's all of this, right? So I'm thinking like, those are all things that we actually do on the design system team. It's just that design systems as a entity haven't been around as long as products, right? And so is there a future state where all of those roles, sales and marketing and customer support, are also inside of the design system team? I would say maybe that's what the most mature design system organizations are trying to do, those things, right? But we don't have the titles necessarily yet. Is this resonating with anybody? Are you feeling this? Or
Yeah, and coming from the startup world, I come from a much smaller organization. We were definitely doing that. I was having my team reach out to customer service, talk with them. We were tagging conversations that customer service was having with end users, so that we could research and dedicate time to understand common themes that were appearing with our customer service team. And then we were also, meeting with our marketing team and testing our design system with them. Do they understand what an H1 means? And if they don't, maybe we need to relabel things so that it's easy and intuitive to use. I think we get kind of caught up in labels and language, but honestly, the best language is the language that everyone in the company understands. So we were kind of working that way, where we were involving every leader in the company in every aspect. And it's also kind of like how my brain works, is that everything's interconnected. And if one piece isn't working properly, then you need to reconnect it to the rest of the organization. And I think through that is language and workshops and making sure that everyone understands and that it's intuitive.
Excellent, Christy. Thank you for sharing. Hi, folks. It's Ben here. We have a lot of really good content left in this episode, but I wanted to pause for just a moment so we could hear from Luke over at Zeroheight.
How much time are you spending wrangling all the aspects of your design system? Trying to create a unified experience with your UI libraries, your code resources, your design tokens. You need a platform that makes managing a design system easier, not a chore. So zeroheight is the design system management platform that centralizes everything, including your documentation. And this year, we've rolled out some game-changing features that make zeroheight even more powerful. First up, we have the adoption tab, which gives you real-time insights into how your design system is actually being used. So you can hook it up directly to your code repos and NPM packages, and it will not only make sure that everyone is using your latest packages, but it'll also give you insights into component usage as well. Finally, you can prove real design system ROI. And then there's our brand new API as well. In a few minutes, you can create your own Figma plugin or API chatbot to bring your documentation to the places that your team is actually searching for it. If you're looking to make design system management seamless and efficient, what are you waiting for? Try Zeroheight for free today by heading to zeroheight.com and use the offer code QUESTION to get a free 90-day trial. That's zeroheight.com and the offer code is QUESTION. Enjoy the show.
For the last 16 years, Ben and I have both been business partners and friends in our company Sparkbox, which has always aimed to build a better web. In the beginning, that was two software engineers coming together believing there was a better way to do things. What Sparkbox evolved to is a complete team that includes user experience, design, engineering, and plenty of consulting and strategy. About 10 years ago, we dove headfirst into design systems, helping some of the world's largest companies and universities, and even tons of small businesses, to help realize the efficiency and promise of what design systems can bring. I continue to be in awe of what Ben learns and shares in this community. I know you'll enjoy this content as much as I have. If you need strategic or tactical help with your design system, swing by sparkbox.com and reach out. We'd love to partner with you and your team. Have a great day.
Let's zoom in a little bit on this bottom section here of the notes and questions area. So this is interesting because Michelle and I both kind of looked through the data, and then we had a little conversation before this started. And one of the things we both identified is sort of this interesting challenge around are these roles necessary, both roles? Are they is one a subset of the other? Is one an evolution of the other? What kinds of organizations have a distinction and what kinds don't? And when I looked through your comments, what I identified was, and I tried to diagram it with the yellow stuff here, this little kind of square in the center, saying like on a scale from less mature to more mature, if we think about individuals, the comments that you shared said individuals that are less mature in their career aren't necessarily aware of or don't understand the distinctions between these roles. But individuals that are more mature through that experience come to understand the distinction and necessity of these roles. On the organizational side, it seemed like what I was hearing from you was less mature individuals have less need, or maybe smaller, or I'm sorry, organizations, not individuals. Smaller or less mature organizations have less need. They assume product designers are going to do all of this. And more mature or larger organizations have more need for distinction between these roles. They hire individuals with different skill sets. So that was my thinking. And then Michelle, I'll let you share kind of your swarm of thoughts here too, because I know you kind of landed on some similar questions.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think in regards to that chart specifically, one of the things that we were thinking about is like with maturity. So at the top, Ben has organizational maturity. And then what kept coming to me, I think maybe individuals is not the right word. Maybe it's UX maturity. So I think that it's one thing that an organization can grow and scale and have robust infrastructure and all of these things. But there could also be an organization that is large, but UX is new to them. Before they had worked with teams outside, they worked with vendors, they worked with agencies, and now UX is showing up. And I think with that individuals, we're saying if UX is less mature, less established in the organization, we're not going to be aware or understand the differences in the role because we're just happy that we have a seat at the table, right? That we're here. And then I think as we start to grow and as we start to advance, I think that's where those really niche roles start to happen. So I've been at organizations where actually the past two that I've been at are similar size, a similar amount of brands and experiences and teams that we're serving on the design systems team. But one of those had a very mature UX team. And with that came conversational design, came UI design, came UX design, came UX research, came content design, came content strategists, came UX writers. And that was like the mature UX, even though the organization was the same. But then I've been at a different company where it was less and you were more expected to wear all of the hats, to be the systems designer, to write the content, to do the thing. So yeah, I love this chart, Ben, because I think it's so interesting that you can like be at different parts as an organization and as a different part as like a UX organization, like the subculture almost within it.
Yeah. What are you all thinking here? Is the systems design role a more advanced product designer? Is that what this is? Or is it the other way around?
Yeah, I would be reticent to hire somebody as a design system designer who never had experience as a product designer. I think they need that basic empathy with the user and knowledge of, all the different skill sets and the challenges that the users will, subscribers, to use your language, which is a good one, will face. I don't know. I just don't know how they could do it if they hadn't had experience themselves in a product design delivery role. I'm also kind of a little skeptical that just because of the size of the organization and the HR policies and stuff, I don't know if we'd actually be able to set up our own job category just to suit the niche of the team. So we're, by necessity, we have to just advertise them as a product designer / design systems or something like that. And we can customize the job description, but we can't define a new job role category. We're tied into the same hiring salary bands and stuff like that, the same seniority levels. So it is quite challenging to actually decide, how competent a product designer would be as a system designer, and given that there's all that other stuff that the system designer kind of might be expected to do, with a different emphasis, like they say, the outreach to the teams, training, support, and stuff like that, which you might need to do informally as a more senior designer of juniors in your team. You might need to train them up how to use your existing assets and stuff, but it's kind of more formally part of the role in the design system team. And yet that's a distinction that isn't captured by our sort of hiring capabilities.
It's like an administrative constraint, essentially, even though the roles may be very different. Yeah. Does everybody agree with the idea that to be a good systems designer, you have to start as a product designer?
I would agree, because
Go ahead, Sarah.
I think there is a quote in the summary that's all system designers are product designers. The system is your product, but not all product designers are system designers. And that hit home because if you're more novice in your UX career, you may not have that empathy grasp or how those components or patterns or molecules get integrated into the engineering aspect side. Whereas if you're a more seasoned product designer, you have that more scope and know how it impacts and ripples.
I think it helps if you have that under your belt, but I don't think it's a necessity. I worked with a junior systems designer, and we were able to teach them how to have empathy for product design. And my favorite thing on this whole board is the characteristics. I think that's, to me, is where you can start in product design, but if you have those characteristics or you lean towards those characteristics in systems as a system designer, that's maybe where you start to navigate towards from a career standpoint. I don't think you have to be an advanced product designer to be a great systems designer. I don't think it's necessarily a next step. To me, it's really those characteristics are if you feel like that's you, and you could be 2 years into your career, I think that's okay. I think it's fine.
So those characteristics were maybe more just not describing the jobs so much as the individual who could do well in those jobs. Is that kind of what you're saying? Yeah.
That's kind of, I can picture myself saying, hey, this is what I do as a systems designer to someone who is maybe less mature, understanding maybe what a design system is, or what maybe they thought they hired a product designer. Instead, they got me as a systems designer and say, actually, I focus on quality over speed. And that's why we're not shipping as fast as maybe you thought. So I see it kind of as both, as the role, but also, are those values for you personally? Do those align as well?
Ron, what do you think?
Yeah, I think Michael put a good nuance on what I was trying to say, and I would actually agree with that interpretation. I think, I wouldn't need to see loads of experience of somebody before, say, you could work in the design system team. Just, enough to know that they're, familiar with the pressures that but it's much more about the mindset and the skills and capabilities. So I don't know if I'm going to wholly backpedal on what I said on the basis of that, but at least I very much liked the nuance that you put in it there.
Maria, are you willing to share? I could see you nodding your head earlier. I don't want to call on you if you're not open to sharing, but
I'm actually agree with guys here, because it's like, it makes so much sense to know like the product and how to do that. But at the same time, you have to think a lot about other things, kind of how developers work, how, like, I don't know, how you connect all those parts together, and you will use it in every way, kind of through your design. So kind of, I can't collect all my thoughts in something good, but I just knock in and agree with the guys,
Yeah. One other thought that I had as I was looking through this was just on the top, I kind of noted this or swap little arrow section here, because one of the things I was thinking is, if you have an immature organization, or if you have an organization full of immature designers, perhaps at the organizational level, distinguishing between these roles would be really good, because it then would open the eyes of the individuals so they could mature on one path or the other, or perhaps move between them, right? As opposed to saying, well, the organization is less mature, we don't have time and space for this. Maybe that's actually a case where we actually need it more, versus the other side, a more mature organization with more mature individuals, where the individuals understand the distinction. The organization maybe doesn't have to care about it as much. So that's one thing I was thinking, like, as somebody who's often consulting with companies, I'm thinking, I might say, if you have a team full of individuals that aren't very mature, I might say at the organizational level, let's distinguish between these. Let's give these people a specialization so they can really go deep on a specific set of expertise instead of expecting them to have the experience to know how to master both. Does that resonate with you all? Is that something you think might work in your orgs or not?
I think the way that you have it originally, like if I'm just thinking logistically, so I started out at small companies and startups, and that was like right where my career started, straight out of school. I went to school for graphic design. And because the organization was small, funding was not there. And I actually think it built my skill set and my character more than if I was forced into kind of a lane right off the bat, because like at the first organization I was at, like I was developing a WordPress. I have no experience in code, but it was like, we're going to figure it out. Like it was like 15 years ago, like I was doing all of those things. And I think I am a more rounded designer. And now that I am like further along in my career, I was able to say like, yes, this is what I love. This is where my passion is. Where I think if I was, I don't know, if you're kind of less mature or less skilled and you're put into a small bucket, I think that you're limiting the career growth of that person. I think that you're asking to spend more funding on all of these specific roles. And I don't know if the amount of work would be there either to like keep those roles busy full time.
Yeah.
You also work a lot faster.
Yeah.
I've been at a large company and we've acquired a small startup, and like they had a design system and we had a design system, and they were like, whoo, like so quick because they like had all the skill set. So they weren't slowed down by some of that weight. So it's like if the organization is not mature, we don't want to like slow it down. We want to figure it out and learn together. And I think it's just creating that culture of psychological safety in those less mature organizations where we're like, try, learn, fail, keep trying. And that's how you're going to really build those strong individuals.
That's a great observation from your experience, Michelle. And I appreciate you sharing that. I definitely have been in those roles where it's like everybody's scrappy. We're just figuring things out. And you learn so much in that model for sure. Awesome, folks. Thank you for chiming in. Let's move over to the deeper discussion section now. Not that what we were just doing was not deep enough, but I just tried to think through three more specific, very specific questions. So the first one of these is about the idea of compromise. And I posted actually down below in the resources section below us down here. There's this YouTube video. I'm not asking you to go watch this now, but after we get off, this might be a chance. It's a very quick video to watch. It's kind of hard to hear because it's an old video, but this is the gentleman I was mentioning before, Russell Ackoff. And he gives this really cool example. He says that the performance of a system depends on how the parts interact, never on how the parts act taken separately. And so when I hear that, and the example that he gives is this, he says, if we were to go around and find, like, evaluate all of the cars in the world and find the car that has the best motor, and we get that motor and we bring it into this room, then we go around and we evaluate which car has the best transmission, and we figure that out. Maybe that's a Mercedes or something. We grab the transmission from that Mercedes, we bring it in. Which one has the best brake system? Maybe that's Porsche. We grab the Porsche brakes, we bring that in. We do this for every piece and part of a car, right? Now what we have in the room is all of the absolute best parts of cars that exist in the world. You try to make a car out of that, and you actually can't, right? Because the parts aren't designed to interact. And so what that means, if you kind of take that in the opposite, is in order for the system to be ideal, the parts can't be ideal, right? You can't have the best of all the parts if you want to have the best system. And so when I hear this, I'm thinking to myself, does the work of systems designers force compromise on the work of product designers? And so that's kind of the first question that I wanted to ask and just open to you all.
I love this example. I'm trying to understand the question a little bit. So does the work of systems designer force compromise on the product designer? So are you saying, like, can you just unpack that a little bit?
Yeah. So if a job of a systems designer is to create the best overall experience, right? Not a specific checkout flow, not just a button that works really well, not just a search section that works really well, but to create the entire system working well, right? All the products across an entire organization. If that's the case, according to this principle of systems thinking from Russell Ackoff, that the performance of a system depends on how the parts interact, never on how they act taken separately. What that means is that it's not actually about the individual pieces and parts working really well. It's about the interactions between them more than it is about the components. And so in this model, I'm just thinking, as a systems designer, my job is to ensure that the system works well, not that the individual parts do. So is that forcing the product designers who are thinking about a very specific subset of the problem to actually compromise in their parts? Does this make sense?
Yeah, I think it does. I think it does compromise, and I think it could lead to I'm not going to use the system because it's too much of a compromise. Sometimes it also depends on the maturity level of the designer and how much they understand systems thinking, and how, if they think, it's actually better for the overall experience, the overall product, that the system works well, versus I actually wanted, as a designer, have the ability to design it the exact way I want. If we try to think of it in other industries or something, I'm not going to come up with a great metaphor off the top of my head, but if there's other designers in other industries, that kind of idea of this designer who is almost a genius kind of, and they create these beautiful things like on their desks and they're drawing stuff. They're not limited by systems around them. They're maybe that architect like Frank Gehry or something, right? They're not limited by someone saying, well, this is, the system you need to kind of fit into. Maybe it is. I don't know. I could be missing something there, but I've seen it in my personally. So I think it does. And it depends on the designer if they're bought into it or not.
I'm on the exact opposite end of the spectrum.
Okay, let's hear it.
So it's very interesting to hear your perspective. So I think that the system, I think that we are improving the work of the product designer. I have a few thoughts. So I think one is it's how you view constraints. So I was taught, and not even just in design, but in life, I was taught that through constraints and hardships and challenges, better things come out of it because you're forced to think differently. When it comes to design systems, to me, it's how you approach it, right? And the mindset that you have and what is accepted in your organization. For example, I could sit down and I'm a designer and someone says, here's your design system, go design the solution. And in my mind, I'm like, I have to use that design system. I have a limited toolbox. I got to figure out how do I combine these things. It's not the best experience. I'm not designed specifically for that user. That's a fail. That compromised the design because the system was there. Now, you could take the exact same design system with a different mindset, and somebody could sit down and they could say, like you were saying, right? We're on our table. I'm going to put my genius and all of my amazing ideas into this solution, right? And I come up with just this great wireframe or great sketch of my genius. And then from there, once I get that in a good place, I start to back it into the system where I can. So I'm like, does my button really need an extra 2 pixels? Nope. And then it starts to tie into the system. And I think what's really important, and this is why I think I struggled with it, saying that it compromises the work of the product designers, is when we think of user experience, consistency is the cornerstone. If every page you go to something different, your user and the cognitive load that they're spending to understand each new behavior and function, that's not helpful. So to me, it's yes, don't let it restrict you off the bat because it'll slow you down. You're going to so hard try to figure out what I need to know all the components and how do they work together. It's no, get your ideas out there, do your thing, and then figure out where can I back this in? And then you end up with this great, innovative, specific experience for the user that you're designing for that is also consistent with the rest of the experience. So yeah, I don't know. I think I literally think it's all mindset and it's all process. It's how you approach it, how you use it, what's accepted in the organization. but it should never be a hard rule. You should never be given a toolbox and someone says, here's your parts. What are you going to build? Like, no, because everything is evolving. Our users are evolving. Technology is evolving. We are evolving. So like that can't be true either.
Yeah. So I like the idea of sort of redefining, the idea of compromise or constraint. I think that helps. Christy, did I see you want to jump in there?
Yeah. I like the word negotiation for this.
Okay.
I think systems design is a negotiation with like product design and user and architecture. And I think it makes it more interesting and fun. But yeah, I think I've designed systems for large enterprise industries as well, for like 80,000 users. And when you're at that scale and you have a new user flow that you're working on, and you come to the systems design and you're using components and you find something that doesn't quite fit, it becomes a negotiation with the designers, like, hey, I'd like to tweak this component, or I'd like to add a new component. Can we talk about this and discuss this? And the systems designers really are responsible for making sure that tweaking that component or adding a new one isn't going to disrupt the other 70,000 users.
Yeah.
So I do think it's more of a negotiation, and I think it can breed more creativity between both designers, because sometimes your initial idea isn't that great anyways. And when you're kind of pushed to be in this box, you're like, okay, actually, I think this is actually simpler and works better anyways. So on a smaller scale at a startup, I had the engineer and the product designer have this negotiation so that they could understand each other. And really the engineers had great ideas and great, even better solutions. So I do think it's a great discussion, and it should happen at any scale.
We're kind of saying the same things in sort of different ways, right? Like Michael, you said it definitely forces compromise. And I think what you both then said, all three of you then said, it's just that the compromise is needed, right? So like you all have the right mindset. You understand the value of cohesion in an experience. So maybe it's for immature designers, product designers who don't necessarily understand that bigger picture, to have that tension, right? To feel that as a compromise that's bad, when in fact the compromise is necessary when we're aligned, for the goals.
One more thing is I think it's like choosing where you work and what you're signing up for. And if you kind of know that ahead of time, because when I worked with like smaller companies, I would have like these really cool experiences where there's like JavaScript and the background moves and it does all these backflips. Like I would like challenge the developers to do these cool, crazy things because they were like a microsite, right? And they would exist for a month and they would go away. But like as I moved into enterprise design, it's completely different. And I think you need to like go into that knowing that it's different. Like I think there's still a place for like digital designers that want to be creative and push the boundaries and like explore new things. And like Dribble is full of that. Yeah. But I just think enterprise design is different. And I think that's where design systems really bring impact, is design at scale and cohesion. Yeah. And so it just depends.
If these roles are distinct, and Michelle had this question earlier about sometimes if there's distinction, then are they going to create tension between them? Like, is there a push and a pull between them, an us versus them mentality? So if the roles are unique, if the skill sets are unique, does that mean that individuals on the product team shouldn't be contributing because they don't necessarily have the experience or skill sets to do systems design? If you imagine that the system itself will never be 100% perfect, right? It's never going to be perfect for every use case that a product designer might need. So when a product designer using the system to build their product comes upon a need that doesn't fit into or isn't offered by or solved by the system, and they do something outside of that system, how could they or should they be contributing that back in some way into the system? So product designers working on the system as opposed to using the system is kind of what I'm getting at there.
Yeah. I think from what I've experienced, I've seen product designers design new features and then submit it to the systems designers. And then it's kind of a back and forth that happens. that new contribution, to where the systems designers kind of tweak it to where it fits in with the rest of the system or can be used by more than one user. So I've seen that. I do absolutely think that should happen. But as in contributing, as in building it and then having engineers work on it without it running through someone that really understands the system, I'm not sure about that.
So you're saying maybe a collaborative contribution model could work versus maybe this also gets at the idea of a federated team, right? If I have product designers on product teams, but they have 10 or 20% of their time they can dedicate to working on the system, is that smart, right? Or do those folks have the necessary skill sets to do the systems design work that's needed?
I think as a manager, unless that product designer has done front-end development or any sort of engineering, I haven't seen them do very well because they don't totally understand how code works or how responsive development works, and they get kind of in their head about pixels or typography or weird things that you just can't incorporate into a design system. So I would say with moderation, with someone monitoring their work or checking their work, it could.
Yeah, I see contribution as like a stretch project. I don't think it should be a role. I think that it's how you define contribution. Like, I think there should be communication that a new pattern is emerging. But yeah, totally. Especially if you think about UX and the diverse backgrounds that we come from. Not everybody in UX has a design background. It's people have a psychology background, people have a research background. It's so broad. And I think when you get to systems, it's heavily on visual design and on technical ability. And it's like you have to be like laser focused in to like, I think it's so different. And I think someone mentioned it earlier about like seeing across all of the experiences, not just seeing your dedicated work stream. And the goal of the design systems is efficiency. So when I have to ask my designers to slow down their delivery cycle and then contribute back and understand all the use cases and know how we build it and follow a governance or a contribution checklist, it's like, I feel like I'm doing the opposite. I feel like I'm here in service of them so that they can do what they do best. And it feels inefficient. It feels frustrating. I don't know. I've worked in both models and I think it's better if the roles work together, right? One goes innovates, ideates, and then one systematizes it.
Yeah, I love the idea of contribution as a stretch project. I tell my customers this a lot, that contribution is not going to help you deliver faster. It's definitely going to slow you down, but there's some really good empathy building exercises that happen there, right? Learning each other's skill sets, if that's a collaborative approach to it. Just working with the systems designers is great for the product designers and vice versa. That connection to the end user, the connection to the bigger overarching goals of consistency in the product. Like, those are things that both of those ends of the spectrum need, Okay, y'all, I sincerely appreciate your time. Thank you all so much for joining. Thank you for participating. I just want to say thanks to Michelle for joining as our co-host, our first ever co-host of the question. So thank you, Michelle, for doing that. It's great to see you all. Thanks for being a part of this first one. Please tell your friends about it. Would love to have them jump in. Okay. Thank you all. Cheers.